Over the past week, we have observed what appears to be bold action by Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the issues of criminal justice and law and order. Boris Johnson has said that the Treasury will allocate 2.5 billion of British taxpayer money to these issues. 100 million will be invested to boost prison security, with a further 85 million for the Crown Prosecution Service. We've also observed a very strong rhetoric from both the Prime Minister and Home Secretary Priti Patel, where they talk of locking people up for longer, abandoning former Justice Secretary David Gauke's plan to scrap short sentences, and have said that they want criminals to feel terror. So I'm going to explore two considerations with what we're seeing here with this rhetoric from the British Prime Minister. So the first issue, what we're actually seeing here is the counterproductive knee-jerk penal populism politics that have been eroding away our once great criminal justice system for the past 25 years, since Tony Blair and the new Labour Blair government politicised law and order via the hijacking of the graves of murdered toddlers Sarah Payne and Jamie Bulger to win votes and secure general election victories. Boris Johnson and Priti Patel in the last week have been very clever by orchestrating, then capitalising on the very lifeblood of the post-Payne, post-Bulger, counterproductive dangerousness, renaissance, guesswork, anxiety, climate era. The lifeblood of this dangerousness renaissance is the hysterical media stridence and sophism that year after year, after decade is destroying our criminal justice system and is the key fundamental source of creating a conveyor belt of lifetime chronic recidivists out of our young offenders institutions and making year after year after year modern Britain a less safer place and a more dangerous place. I'll give you an example. So last week we witnessed the shocking and heinous machete attack on 10-year veteran Essex Police Constable Stuart Eton. Boris Johnson referenced this crime in his law and order tough on crime rhetoric, evidencing the fact that the Tory Parliament, the mainstream media, and our draconian, dilapidated criminal justice system is perpetrator and culpability obsessed. The mainstream media focus with the crime against Police Constable Stuart Eton should be on the bravery and courage and heroism displayed by this police constable, and the media should not be focusing on the perpetrator with this obsession with culpability, and should instead be running campaigns to have Police Constable Stuart Eton commended for his bravery via knightings or medals or such like. But no, instead they sow mass hysteria and anxiety at the expense and disrespect, in my opinion, towards Police Constable Stuart Eton to A, sell newspapers for profit, and B, to push state-sponsored political ideology and agenda. PC Stuart Eton's family were categorical. They asked the media to not share graphic imagery and footage of the attack on the police constable, but did the Sun newspaper listen? No, they didn't, and it's a disgrace and they should hang their heads in shame. Do not for one moment underestimate the ongoing short, medium and long-term damage of these perpetrator and culpability-obsessed systems, people and media outlets, because within this there are two very important things that are missed. Number one, when the entire focus is on the perpetrator and culpability, then the potential wider and socio-economic influences in Index Offence Commission are absolutely and entirely missed, disregarded and dismissed. Number two, the victims of crime are again entirely disregarded and dismissed. Victims of crime in modern Britain are treated appallingly and disgracefully. Only a few days ago, the mother of murdered teenager Yusuf Maki, Debbie, spoke of her pain and torment of having to share bathrooms and a public court waiting room with her son's killer, who mocked her and laughed at her throughout the trial, doing the moonwalk in front of her whilst on trial. Last year, the former president of the Supreme Court, Baroness Hale of Richmond, said that the reputation of the great British judiciary was hanging by a thread. Make no mistake, the reputation around the world, the authenticity and legitimacy of the once great British judiciary is done. Any modern thinking, prospective stratagem or legislation will be damage limitation. And that's what we need. We need modern thinkers and strategists, not populists. Johnson and Patel are populists and not strategists, so we are seeing dark and sad times in modern Britain. The peak of the disastrous politicisation of law and order also signifies grave, grave injustices. All over England and Wales, rape cases are collapsing due to the CPS and police admitting that they hid evidence against defendants in rape cases that would have proven innocence. Many of these men went on to receive double-figure prison terms. Barristers all over the nation are on strike due to the legal aid cuts that have seen it impossible for anybody from within marginalised and oppressed groups and communities realise justice. Our prisons are cesspits of humanity, characterised by a drug and mental health epidemic of proportions never seen before in modern penal and criminal justice history, a deflated, undersourced workforce working in the most violent conditions in the entire of Western Europe. The peak of the carnage can be summed up like this. We have short tariff IPP prisoners serving Strasbourg-condemned barbaric IPP sentences a decade over tariff, whom were sentenced to short tariff IPP imprisonment, yet are languishing in jail for 14 years now with no hope, while baby rapists and baby killers are set free after only a few years. For example, IPP prisoner Danny Weatherson was sentenced to IPP with a 15-month tariff for the attempted robbery of a mobile phone and a coat, and is now in his 14th year of indefinite detention. Danny slashed his own throat in a suicide attempt whilst enduring catastrophic mental health breakdown due to the barbaric and indefensible cruelty of short tariff post-tariff IPP detention. James Ward received an IPP sentence with a 10-month tariff for setting fire to a prison mattress and is now in his 14th year. James has frequently self-harmed and spends his days isolated 24 hours a day in prison healthcare units, naked, covered in his own excrement. Meanwhile, Baby P's killer was granted parole after only 5 years. Just recently, serial baby rapist and Britain's most high-profile female paedophile, Vanessa George, who abused up to 30 babies and toddlers and refused to reveal their identities, has been granted parole after only 10 years. So we have people serving Strasbourg-condemned 99-year life sentences who should not even be in prison, let alone be serving life, whilst we have baby rapists and baby killers released after only a few years. And the British public, British taxpayer pay for this. And then the same British taxpayer then supports the knee-jerk, counterproductive penal populist politics that causes this. This is the consequence of the politicisation of law and order. How have we got here in a supposed advanced, sophisticated thinking nation such as Great Britain, where we have the most prestigious schools in the world? Norway and Portugal are leading the globe on drug reform and low recidivism, and that's why these countries are some of the safest countries on earth. Norway is currently running at around 16 to 20% recidivism, while Great Britain are running at near 90% child recidivism, which is just about the worst on the planet, and it's been like that for donkey's years. We are light years behind these nations with the issue of criminal justice, but we have to continue to have hope. We need modern thinkers and sophisticated strategists, not populists. We need long-term strategic planning, not the knee-jerk politics and short-term symptom resolution fixing that we are witnessing from Patel and Johnson. And the criminal justice revolution can be, shall be, and will be victim-focused. The second issue observed in the past week. with the apparent bold action on law and order and criminal justice is the issue of monetary investment. All of this money will go up in smoke. British taxpayer money set alight by clueless populist politicians. We see this over and over and over again. The entirety of this taxpayer allocated 2.5 billion will be wasted on symptom resolution and not problem resolution. To fix a problem, you have to fix it at its source, not at its symptom. A few years ago, we had a 2.5 billion investment in law and order. A staggering quarter billion of British taxpayer money was spent on HMP Berwyn in Wales. This first UK Titan prison was the Ministry of Justice flagship prison of reform and rehabilitation and public protection. Designed by the best architects with no blind spots where attacks could take place. Lo and behold, within a year at HMP Berwyn, we witnessed exact the same problems that are endemic across the entirety of the prison estate. The drug epidemic, the violence, the mental health epidemic, the security department being rendered ineffective, the self-harming and the suicides and the violence against staff, as well as HMP Berwyn very quickly becoming a breeding ground for the pro-criminal thinking, attitudes and beliefs for the prisoners detained there, all of which will be released back into the community, into your communities. Because you're treating the symptom and not the problem. The problem being the very fact that our young offenders institutions, prisons, even the modern prisons, as is the case with HMP Berwyn, and our mental health care facilities in modern Britain are diseased to the very core with endemic institutional racism, a culture of child abuse, child torture, and a culture of a perception of when anybody is detained in such institution, no matter whether man, woman or child, they are perceived as subhuman and not worthy of a second chance and not worthy of redemption. 19 years after the sickening racist murder of teenager Zahid Mubarak at Feltham Young Offenders Institution in 2000, Feltham is on its knees. It's on its knees and it's on breaking point and it's going to go up at any time. The problem is in the DNA of these institutions, and we need modern thinking, sophisticated strategists. We need 5 billion, not 2.5, and we need to rip and tear the very heart out of these institutions and start over. In the past week, we have not heard a whisper out of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's mouth regarding the well-being of police officers or prison officers. This, in no uncertain terms, evidences Boris Johnson's lack of stratagem whilst reinforcing his populist political standpoint. The customer, which in this instance is the public or protection of the public, does not come first. The customer does not come first. Your staff come first. Look after your staff and rest assured they will take care of your customer. The 100 million in prison security that will be invested will be wasted because wherever there's a will, there's a way, and wherever there's a loophole, man will exploit it. History shows us that. History is a cycle, not a line. Prisoners are ingenious, and if you shut down one avenue or channel where drugs enter prisons, then in only a very short period of time, the prisoners will find another way. Medium and long term, this investment of 100 million of British taxpayer money is counterproductive. If this 100 million was invested in generating awareness of, supporting and helping frontline police officers and prison officers and NHS nurses with the mental health problems they encounter with their work, coupled with strong leadership, you would witness a transformation in the quality of work and results within the police and prison service on the front line. A complete transformation. We need modern thinking politicians who lift up and inspire and support our demoralised police officers, nurses and prison officers. Boris Johnson's prospective 10,000 prison place expansion plan is a recipe for disaster and will send what's left of our broken and dilapidated criminal justice and penal system to hell. And Patel and Johnson will cement Great Britain's reputation in the world as the rogue state nation of the Western world, where injustice is frequent, the road to justice for the oppressed is impossible, and Great Britain will be a nation where human life is cheap and the right to life is no more. The most susceptible to future injustice and immeasurable human suffering will be the poor, ethnic minorities, marginalised groups, those from poor socio-economic backgrounds and communities, those with learning difficulties, the disabled, the deaf, the dyslexic, and those whom suffer mental health. At the same time, we shall observe the rich and powerful get richer and continue to escape justice via exercising their vast array of resources and powerful friends to escape and evade justice. For the great British penal and criminal justice system is, by way of design, structured to punish, demonise and criminalise the poor and the marginalised and the non-white, while at the same time protecting the rich and powerful, despite the fact that most people commit crime. The recent Boris Johnson and Priti Patel counterproductive knee-jerk penal populist politics reinforces and magnifies this unbalanced criminal justice system and sows the seeds for this endemic entrenched culture to continue for years and years and years to come. And the great British taxpayer will never have faith in modern criminal justice until this imbalance is balanced to a point where all criminals are held to account for their crimes, no matter their background, ethnicity, wealth, or power.